Malik Jordan was halfway down Maple Street when the evening quiet broke apart. It had been one of those ordinary walks home. Headphones around his neck but not playing, grocery bag in one hand, the late sun stretching shadows across the sidewalk. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of suburban stillness where trimmed hedges and identical mailboxes suggested predictability. Malik had walked that route hundreds of times. He knew the rhythm of it. Who watered their lawns, which houses left porch lights on early, where kids rode bikes in loose circles. That was why the sound stood out immediately. A sharp bark, then another, not playful, urgent, frantic, followed by a child's scream. Malik turned before he even fully processed what he'd heard. Across the street, near the open gate of a yard, he recognized as belonging to a white family down the block. A large dog had lunged toward a small boy. The boy couldn't have been older than 8. He'd fallen backward, arms up, crying out as the dog snapped near his leg. Malik didn't think. He moved. He crossed the street quickly, voice raised firm and loud, clapping once. The way he'd learned years ago could break an animal's focus. The dog hesitated just long enough for Malik to grab a fallen branch near the curb and step between them, positioning himself as a barrier rather than striking. He didn't escalate, just commanded space, voice steady and sharp. "Back! Go home!" The dog barked again, pacing, uncertain. Malik held ground, keeping distance between it and the boy until the animal retreated through the open gate. Only then did he lower the branch. He turned to the child, crouching slightly to soften his presence. "You okay?" The boy was shaking, eyes wet but alert. There were scrapes on his arm and a shallow tear in his jeans, nothing catastrophic but enough to sting and scare. I think so," the boy said. Malik nodded. "Let's get you inside." Before they could move, a siren cut through the air. Sharp, approaching fast. Someone must have called immediately when the screaming started. Within moments, a patrol car rolled to a stop nearby. 2 officers stepped out, both white, expressions already sharpened by urgency. They approached quickly, assessing the scene. The boy, the yard, Malik holding the branch. One officer's focus landed squarely on Malik. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Malik set the branch down deliberately. "Dog got loose. Kid fell. I stepped in." The officer's gaze didn't soften. "Sir, step back." Malik complied, raising his hands slightly away from his sides to signal cooperation. The second officer moved toward the child, speaking gently, checking for injuries. The first officer remained fixed on Malik. "We received a report of a disturbance involving a child," he said. "Can you explain why you're holding an object near him?" Malik kept his voice even. "To keep the dog away. I dropped it." The officer studied him for a long second. That silent evaluation Malik knew too well, where presence itself seemed to require justification. "Identification," the officer said. Malik provided it without resistance. Meanwhile, the boy found his voice. "He helped me," he said, pointing toward Malik. "The dog was coming at me." The officer glanced at him but didn't shift tone immediately. Questions continued. Where Malik lived, why he was there, what exactly he did. Malik answered each calmly, consistently, resisting the pull of frustration that pressed at the edges of his chest. Soon the boy's parents emerged from their house, alarmed and breathless. The officers spoke with them, while the second officer confirmed the dog had indeed escaped through an unlatched gate. The narrative slowly aligned with reality. The boy repeated his account clearly. Malik had intervened. The dog was the source of danger. The first officer's posture shifted. Subtly, not dramatically, but enough to signal recalibration. He handed Malik back his ID. "All right. Looks like you were assisting." Malik nodded once. "Yes." A brief pause followed. Not apology. Not acknowledgement beyond procedural closure. "Well, you're free to go," the officer said. Malik thanked the parents for checking on their son and resumed his walk home, grocery bag still in hand, heartbeat gradually returning to baseline. The street regained its earlier quiet, but Malik's thoughts stayed active. He wasn't shaken by helping. That part had been instinctive, immediate. What lingered instead was the familiar transition, from helper to suspect, before facts settled into place. The shift wasn't loud or dramatic. It never was. It lived in tone, posture, assumption. At home, he unpacked groceries slowly, letting routine ground him again. He poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched evening deepen into night. He didn't regret stepping in. Not for a second. Because when someone needed help, action mattered more than interpretation. And even knowing how the situation might be viewed, Malik would make the same choice again, every time, because character wasn't defined by how people first perceived you. It was defined by what you did when no one had finished forming their opinion yet. And that night, somewhere down the block, a child slept safely because someone chose to act first and explain later. Malik didn't expect the incident to follow him into the next day, but certain moments didn't end when the street grew quiet. They lingered in memory, in body, in the way awareness sharpened around familiar surroundings. He went to bed that night with the calm certainty he had done the right thing. Yet he woke with the residual weight of the interaction with the police still sitting somewhere behind his ribs. Morning light softened everything. The neighborhood looked ordinary again. Lawns trimmed, sprinklers ticking, joggers passing with headphones in. Malik stepped outside to grab his mail and found himself glancing instinctively toward the house where the incident had happened. The gate was closed now, secure. As he turned back toward his porch, he heard someone call his name. It was the boy's father. The man approached with a careful smile. Not performative, not awkward, just sincere. His son walked beside him, arm bandaged lightly where the scrape had been cleaned. "We wanted to thank you," the father said, "for yesterday." Malik nodded. "He handled it well." The boy looked up. "I wasn't that brave," he admitted. Malik smiled slightly. "You stayed calm enough. That counts." They talked for a few minutes. The father explained that the dog belonged to another neighbor, and animal control had already been contacted. He also mentioned something Malik hadn't known. Body camera footage had been reviewed after the officers filed their report. "They documented that you intervened," the father said. "It's on record." Malik acknowledged it quietly, appreciating the transparency even if it didn't erase the initial assumptions. Later that afternoon, Malik received a knock at his door. Two officers stood there, one of them the same officer from the night before. His posture was different now, less guarded. "We're following up on the incident," he said, "just closing documentation." Malik stepped outside to speak with them. The officer explained that the situation had been fully reviewed and clarified. He thanked Malik for assisting and confirmed there were no further questions. It wasn't a dramatic apology. Law enforcement culture rarely framed things that way. But the tone carried recognition. Malik accepted it calmly. "Glad the kid's okay." The officers left, and Malik returned inside, reflecting on how resolution often arrived quietly rather than ceremonially. There was no grand acknowledgement, no narrative correction broadcast beyond paperwork, and brief words exchanged on a doorstep. That evening, Malik walked the same route again. He passed the same houses, the same sidewalks, the same stretch of curb where it had all happened. The space felt unchanged physically, yet he felt more aware within it, aware of how quickly situations could transform depending on perspective, presence, and interpretation. As he neared home, he spotted the boy riding his bike carefully along the sidewalk, supervised this time, laughter replacing fear. Malik continued walking, carrying with him not resentment but reflection. He understood something deeply reinforced through the experience. Doing the right thing didn't guarantee immediate recognition. It rarely did, but integrity wasn't transactional. It wasn't performed for validation. It was practiced. Inside his apartment, he settled into the quiet of the evening, letting the normal sounds of life resume their place. Refrigerator humming, distant traffic, pages turning as he read. And he knew with clarity that if the moment repeated itself, if urgency called again, he would step forward just the same. Because sometimes courage wasn't defined by confrontation or acknowledgement. Sometimes it was simply the decision to act when action mattered, even when you understood that the story might not begin in your favor. And knowing that, Malik rested easily, grounded in the certainty that character lived not in how he was perceived in those first tense minutes, but in what he chose to do before anyone had asked who he was. In the weeks that followed, the incident faded outwardly into neighborhood memory, but not entirely from Malik's awareness. He resumed his routines, work deadlines, grocery runs, evening walks, and Maple Street returned to its ordinary cadence. Yet something subtle had shifted in how people greeted him. A few neighbors who had once offered only polite nods now stopped for conversation. Others carried a slightly embarrassed kindness, as though recognizing something they hadn't previously examined. Malik accepted each interaction evenly without dwelling on it. He didn't need validation to confirm his actions. Still, he understood that perception evolved through exposure, and sometimes one event reshaped how presence was interpreted. One Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood association hosted a small outdoor gathering in the park. Food tables, folding chairs, children running between games. Malik attended casually, not intending to center himself in anything, just enjoying the open air. The boy he had helped spotted him almost immediately and ran over with unfiltered excitement, recounting to friends how Malik had scared the dog away. The boy's mother joined them, smiling warmly. "He hasn't stopped telling that story," she said. "We're grateful." Malik chuckled softly. He recovered fast. That's what matters. Nearby conversations drifted toward community safety, gate latches, pet control, emergency awareness. And Malik listened more than he spoke. He noticed something important. The narrative had shifted from suspicion to contribution. Not dramatically, but organically. The story circulating now was one of assistance rather than confrontation. Later that afternoon, a familiar patrol car rolled slowly past the park before stopping nearby. One of the officers from that night stepped out briefly to speak with organizers about routine matters. When he saw Malik, he gave a short nod of recognition. Simple, professional, human. Malik returned the nod. No tension remained, just acknowledgement that both of them had navigated a chaotic moment that now sat in the past. As evening settled, Malik walked home again along Maple Street. The air carried the scent of cut grass and barbecue smoke, and porch lights flickered on one by one. He paused briefly near the spot where everything had unfolded weeks earlier. The gate was reinforced now. A small sign reminded residents to secure pets properly. Physical evidence of lessons learned. He continued walking, reflecting on how quickly events could define or distort perception, and how time, clarity, and steady presence could reshape those perceptions again. Malik never framed himself as someone seeking confrontation or praise. He saw himself simply as someone participating responsibly in the environments he inhabited. Back home, he set his keys on the counter and poured a glass of water, letting the quiet of the apartment settle around him. He thought about the arc of the experience: instinctive action, misunderstanding, resolution, community adjustment. He recognized something that had grown clearer through each phase. Respect rarely arrived instantly. Trust rarely formed without friction. And fairness often required patience beyond the initial moment of truth. But character, that part never depended on timing. It existed before assumptions, during scrutiny, and long after recognition. Malik switched off the kitchen light and looked out the window at the calm street below. He didn't replay the incident anymore. He didn't carry resentment or pride. He carried understanding, deeper, steadier, of how integrity functioned when tested by uncertainty. And with that understanding, he moved forward through the night, grounded in the quiet certainty that the right choice, made without hesitation, had a way of shaping not only outcomes, but perspectives that might one day choose differently because of it. Malik didn't realize how much that night had lodged in his body until the neighborhood tried to pretend it had moved on. Weeks passed, then months, and on the surface everything looked normal again. Kids riding bikes, sprinklers ticking, porch lights coming on at dusk. But Malik's awareness stayed tuned a little higher, like a radio you can't quite turn down. He wasn't walking around scared. He was walking around informed. He had learned, the hard way, that helping in a crisis didn't guarantee you'd be seen as a helper when uniforms arrived and adrenaline needed a target. That evening, he was coming home late again, carrying nothing but his keys and the quiet fatigue of a long day. The air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. As he turned onto Maple Street, he heard raised voices at the corner under a street lamp. Sharp, clipped words that bounced off the houses and made the block feel suddenly smaller. It wasn't the playful noise of neighbors chatting. It was the tense kind of arguing that makes you slow down without meaning to, because something in you recognizes that it could spill into something worse. He wasn't planning to get involved. He had no interest in being pulled into anyone else's drama. But then he recognized the child's voice, higher, strained, trying to be brave. And he looked up and saw the boy from that night months ago standing with his parents. The boy's arm was wrapped in a light bandage again, not fresh injury, more like an old scrape that had become a symbol now. Across from them stood an older white man holding a leash. A large dog sat at the man's heel, wearing a muzzle, body stiff with tension. The man's grip on the leash was tight, but not confident, more annoyed than careful. The mother's voice carried clearly. "You said you fixed it. You said this wouldn't happen again." The older man's response was flat. "I did fix it. Muzzle? Training? You people need to relax." The phrase, "you people," hit the air like a slap. Malik wasn't even part of the conversation yet, but his stomach tightened at how easily disrespect slid into the sentence as casual as breathing. The boy's eyes darted toward Malik, and then his face changed. Recognition, relief, something like hope. He took a step forward. "That's him," the boy blurted out, loud enough for everyone to hear. He pointed at Malik. "That's the man who helped me. He saved me." For a moment the arguing stopped. The mother turned, eyes widening, and when she saw Malik, her expression shifted into something complicated. Gratitude mixed with embarrassment, like she remembered not only the dog but the sirens, the officers, the way the situation had almost been twisted before it was understood. You're Malik, right?" she asked, stepping closer, as if she'd been wanting to say something for months. Malik nodded once. "Yeah. How's he doing?" The boy puffed his chest a little, trying to look fearless. "I'm okay," he said, but his feet edged back half a step when the dog shifted its weight. The movement was small, automatic, and Malik saw it clearly. Fear stored in muscle memory. The mother noticed it too and instinctively placed a hand on her son's shoulder. She looked back at the older man holding the leash. "See? He's still scared." The man rolled his eyes. "Kids get scared. It doesn't mean the dog's dangerous." The dog let out a low sound. Not a full growl, but a vibration of warning. The boy stiffened. Malik's shoulders tightened without him meaning to. He wasn't afraid of the animal, but he respected how quickly a situation could ignite when someone in control refused to take it seriously. The mother's voice trembled. Anger and exhaustion mixed together. Your gate was open last time. Your dog ran into the street. The older man snapped back. And now it's not. End of story. Malik didn't want to become the center of this, but he also couldn't ignore what he was seeing. A child who still flinched, a mother who still carried the fear, and an owner who cared more about being offended than being responsible. He spoke calmly, not loudly, not with attitude, just clear. Sir, if he's stepping back when the leash moves, that tells you how it affected him. The man's head turned toward Malik, eyes narrowing. Who asked you? Malik held his gaze. No one. But I was there when it happened. I'm telling you what I'm seeing. The man scoffed. So now you're an expert? I'm a witness, Malik said evenly. And I'm someone who had to stand between your dog and that child. The mother exhaled sharply, like someone finally felt less alone in their reality. Thank you, she murmured, and Malik understood she wasn't only thanking him for that night, she was thanking him for saying out loud what she'd been saying and not being believed. The older man shifted his stance, jaw tight. This is harassment. The word hung there, harassment. Another attempt to flip the story, to turn accountability into victimhood. Before Malik could respond, a car rolled slowly up the street. No siren, no rush, just a patrol vehicle easing to the curb the way police do when they've received a noise call and expect either a misunderstanding or a small mess. Two white officers stepped out and approached the group under the street lamp. Malik felt his body register the change before his mind did. Not fear exactly, more like the tightening of a seatbelt. Memory. The last time sirens had arrived and the first suspicion had landed on him. He refused to let that happen again. The first officer spoke as he reached them. Evening. We got a call about a disturbance. The mother started talking quickly, words tumbling over each other. The older man cut in. It's nothing. Just neighbors being dramatic. The officer's eyes swept across the group and landed on Malik for a fraction longer than everyone else. Malik caught it. He understood what that fraction of a second could become if he stayed silent. So he spoke first, calmly, respectfully, and with structure, like someone who knew exactly how stories got written in reports. Officer, Malik said, I'm Malik Jordan. I was walking home and heard raised voices. The child recognized me because months ago I intervened when a dog attacked him on this street. I stopped to make sure everything was okay. No one is being threatened right now. The dog is muzzled and leashed. The officer blinked, surprised by the clarity. The second officer's hand hovered near his notebook, then moved decisively as he began writing. The first officer asked, You said you intervened previously? Yes, Malik replied evenly. There was a call that night. It should be in your system. The mother nodded quickly. He helped my son. The police questioned him at first, but my son told them he saved him. The older man's face tightened. This is ridiculous. The officer looked at the dog, then at the leash, then at the older man. Sir, is this your dog? Yes, the man said. Do you have it under control? The officer asked. Of course, the man snapped. The officer didn't match his tone. He stayed steady. Then the gate to your property needs to remain secured at all times. And if this dog has a history of aggressive behavior, animal control may require further measures. Do you understand? The man's eyes flicked away, irritated that the attention had shifted onto him instead of Malik. Yeah, I understand. The second officer asked Malik for ID. Malik handed it over calmly. No protest, no sudden movements, no frustration offered up for interpretation. The officer checked it and handed it back, then nodded in a way that felt more neutral than suspicious. All right, the first officer said. Keep it down and keep the dog secured. If there's another incident, it won't be handled as a neighbor dispute. The officers began to step away. The mother exhaled like someone releasing a breath she'd been holding for months. She looked at Malik, eyes wet but steady now. Thank you, she said quietly. "I'm sorry about what happened last time. They looked at you like—" She stopped, ashamed to say it out loud. Malik kept his voice soft, but honest. "It happens fast. People see what they expect to see." The boy stepped closer to Malik, still careful but braver now. "Are you scared of police?" he asked, blunt in the way kids could be. Malik paused, choosing truth without transferring fear. "I respect what they're supposed to do," he said, "and I also know I have to speak clearly because sometimes they don't understand the situation right away." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing that. "So you told them first?" "Yeah," Malik said. "I told the truth first." The older man tugged the leash impatiently and started walking away, muttering under his breath. The dog followed, still tense, muzzle catching the street lamp light. The mother held her son close as they turned toward their house, her hand steady on his shoulder. Malik stood under the street lamp for a moment after they left, letting the night settle again. The street was quiet, but he could still feel the echo of raised voices, the patrol car's presence, the way the officer's gaze had lingered on him at first, and then moved elsewhere once Malik spoke. He walked the final block home, thinking about how different it had been this time, not because the system had transformed, but because Malik had. He hadn't waited to be positioned. He hadn't waited for someone else to narrate him. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and let the silence of his apartment wrap around him like a blanket. He washed his hands slowly, then sat on the edge of the couch, breathing out the last of the tension. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a victim. He felt like a person who had learned to protect his peace with clarity. And that night, in a neighborhood that liked to keep things quiet and comfortable, Malik understood something with a steady certainty. Sometimes doing the right thing wasn't only about stepping in when danger appeared. Sometimes it was also about stepping into the story, calmly, firmly, before someone else decided who you were.